On this channel, we like to do deep dives into Star Wars. Sometimes that involves grabbing a shovel and seeing how deep into the lore we can get. Sometimes it means finding correlations between our Star Wars galaxy and our own galaxy. But oftentimes the most rewarding treasures we uncover are the ones planted by the creators of the content, the themes and messages behind the story. The TV show Andor, for instance, discusses the ideas and motivations behind rebellion better than any TV show I've ever seen. It showcases the true nature of the Empire, the banality of its evil.
This is Unit 52D. Level 5, Room 2. The D is for day shift.
And how its oppression quietly seeped into every open pore in society until it became the norm.
The Empire has been choking us so slowly we're starting not to notice. The time has come to force their hand.
Andor clearly outlined the hardships, the challenges that instigators of a rebellion must face, the sacrifices that need to be made quietly in the shadows.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
What Andor gets right more than even the original trilogy is the true nature of authoritarian dictatorships. How they beat down and try to control the independent spirit that exists within all of us. And what's even better about it is that it's honest. It does not sugarcoat the price that one must pay for rebellion. If anything, I believe Andor is a stark warning to all of those weekend activists who will go outside and protest anything, even the smallest of inconveniences. I mean, rebellions are sacred, they are deadly serious, and they should not be planned unless there is a real need for one. What makes Andor such a terrific series wasn't just the acting, the dialogue, the setting and tone, it's really the central themes of rebellion that is so thoroughly explored. It's the emotions and thought that it provokes from the audience. We are touched by the relatable truths we see on screen. It makes us reflect on our own lives, the societies that we live in. And I think this is what makes Andor so valuable. Now, of course, I'm not against entertainment for entertainment's sake, of course, but in a modern society, having stories with meaning and values are extremely important. Especially in the United States, a nation that is not connected by one ethnic background or a religion like so many other nations in the world. This country is an experiment. It's a relatively new concept, and its founders were running away from the old way of doing things. They believed that where you were born, who you were born to, didn't matter. It also didn't matter which gods you prayed to as long as you pledged allegiance to the Constitution and the set of political principles this country was founded upon. And these principles were, generally very good things that most human beings could agree on. They have the protection of individual rights, freedoms concerning religion, expression, assembly, and the right to petition. Now, when you have one of the most diverse countries in the world with people from all over with different viewpoints and values, this creates a sense of cultural richness that makes the US a world leader in innovation and soft power. It also means our political discourse can get pretty crazy. I mean, for any nation to truly function, you need a set of shared principles and values that everyone can agree upon. Our education system does an okay job at creating a set of standard values that all Americans can get behind. I mean, social studies and understanding our Constitution is in every curriculum after all. But then there are the other stories, the stories that come from art, that come from movies, TV shows, from our celebrities, from heroes in our society. They also have a huge impact on our culture. George Lucas understood this best. When he created Star Wars, he wasn't just looking to make a sci-fi adventure film. He wanted to create what he called modern mythology. Growing up in the turbulent 1960s, in the middle of the draft protests during the Vietnam War, Lucas most likely saw the negative impacts that division had on the country. George Lucas was also quite a spiritual person. He might have been against organized religion, but he understood that believing in a higher power brought a sense of richness to one's life that you just couldn't get from being an atheist. And so Star Wars, in his mind, was presented as an alternative to classrooms and to churches or other religions. This was a value system that was really designed for everyone to learn and take part of. The idea was to create a pop culture movement that also instilled good values into the audience. And given the popularity of Star Wars, I think it was an exceptionally wise move for Lucas to add such positive values, like anti-authoritarianism, into it. And in this modern world where social media memes are the way we communicate with one another, it's very possible for real-life political movements to stem out of essentially pop culture moments. Whether it's the Myanmar students who 3 years earlier adopted the Hunger Games three-finger salute to protest the military junta in their country. Many of those students are still not at school and are fighting alongside insurgents in the border regions of the country, representing the greatest threat the Burmese military junta has ever faced. Or what about all those burnt-out Russian tanks and vehicles sprayed with the words Wolverines in the suburbs of Ukraine? Then there's my own experiences covering the Hong Kong democracy protests, where students at the barricades sang "Do You Hear the People Sing" from Les Mis as they stared down the police. Sometimes all it takes is the right song to take down a wall of oppression. And Danke, mein Hof. I mean, since the very beginning of time, authoritarians have tried to control the songs and tales that the people consumed in order to control the hearts and minds of the people. Whether it was the Romans trying to crack down on that Jewish preacher from Bethlehem, or Xi Jinping trying to destroy Winnie the Pooh. Stories are powerful because they can lead to ideas, and ideas are the things that motivate us and inspire us. And so while I love shows like The Mandalorian because Star Wars is about fun and explosions as well, shows like Andor will always have a special place in my heart because of how they can touch us in the real world. And surprisingly, the other Disney-era Star Wars show that does a great job at discussing these more important themes is not one of the many live-action TV shows or the sequel trilogy that Disney has created, but the animated show known as The Bad Batch. When I first heard about The Bad Batch, I thought to myself, awesome, they're finally gonna give us the show that us Clone Wars fans have always wanted. An entire show with a bunch of clones fighting in action-packed sequences non-stop. More action, more war. Let's do it. But it became very clear that other than that first episode of the Battle of Kalar, this show was actually going to be far more intimate and nothing like the Clone Wars at all, other than just some characters coming back in the animation style. No, The Bad Batch turned out to be one of the most tightly focused and thematically strong entries into the Star Wars franchise. And from day one, it was always about family. When The Bad Batch's first season released, the world was actually in a pretty bad place. I don't know if you guys remembered. We were about a year into the pandemic at the time, and everyone was scared, confused, angry, bored, paranoid, or a mixture of all those things. The world was in a chaotic pause, and most people didn't know what would happen in the future. Many of us lost our jobs, our businesses, or were forced to do school online. It was a period of great change and confusion. And so what we see in The Bad Batch, the destruction of the Republic, the rise of the New Order, is actually an analog of what was happening in our own world at the time. In times of great chaos, the normal things that we take for granted seem to be a lot harder to get, whether it's credits or toilet paper or even food. I remember talking to my cousins who were in Shanghai and trapped inside of their apartments for weeks at a time without any contingency or plan. It was horrifying. Now, in times when wider society is become crazy, we generally look at our community, our friends and family for help. And this is kind of the environment you sense on Typical City when the Bad Batch return from their Order 66 mission. Things are changing fast, and the future seems very uncertain. But at least together, Echo, Tech, Wrecker, Hunter, and Crosshair, they could achieve anything. They could defeat any foe. Family equals safety. Family is your home. And during the pandemic, when things started getting crazy, people also started turning back to family and friends once more as well. One of the interesting side effects of the pandemic was a complete reversal of modern society's destruction of the extended family home. Young professionals were moving back home to live with their parents. The nuclear family was opening up now, and you had several generations under the same roof, one household taking care of one another. And while multiple generations were living with each other once again for the first time in years, you also had this kind of crazy political discourse that was separating our country as well. In calmer times, one's political views weren't always the main things discussed at the dinner table, but with social media maturing and becoming a nasty part of the political process, things were only getting worse. Now more and more people were finding their own identity through the lens of a political party. Ugh. A similar kind of political awakening happens to the Bad Batch. I mean, during the Clone Wars, their job was simple. The clones followed their orders, and more importantly, were loyal to one another more than anything. Their competency on the battlefield meant that they were given a long leash and allowed to do more or less whatever they wanted, as long as they delivered. The Empire, on the other hand, was not open to such a relaxed arrangement. Its desire for control and obedience ran counter to the spirit of the unit. Now, it's very clear that the Bad Batch were going to leave the Empire, but as long as they did it together as a unit, I thought they would be fine, but that's not what happened. You see, the rest of the Bad Batch didn't realize that Crosshair actually has some very authoritarian tendencies. He's a true believer in the security and safety that the Empire could provide for the galaxy. And this misunderstanding is causing some pretty big issues. It all starts with Order 66 itself. Hunter and the rest of the clones are not affected by the inhibitor chips and therefore refuse to shoot the Jedi Padawan Caleb Dume. First, they were suspicious about the orders given to them, and they also had a personal relationship with the boy. On top of that, he was just a kid, not someone who deserved to get executed. Of course, that's not what Crosshair saw. He believed the Empire's story about a larger Jedi coup that was planning to seize power. In Caleb, he saw the dangerous Jedi Knight that he could one day become, and so he tries to kill the boy. The Bad Batch at this point are in denial that Crosshair is a bit different from them as far as their political views go. Hunter is a great point man for his team, but his leadership abilities are a bit lacking. I think he has more of a loner personality in my opinion. And I think it's this blind spot that he has that makes his team completely unprepared for the moment where Crosshair turns against his brothers and leaves them. I mean, this is kind of a shock to the Bad Batch. They grew up with Crosshair. They believed that he was one of them. They believed that, politics came second to family. And I think in the last few years, a lot of families and friends have also come to this shocking realization that they have different political and worldviews compared to their loved ones. And many of us, we made rash decisions based off of this. We decided that our politics are more important than our actual real relationships that are based on real experiences and stuff like that. We forget that it's easy for people to get pumped up by what we see in the news. It's designed that way. And social media, that's even worse. Oh, do you like Donald Trump? You're a dumb piece of shit who's also a racist and a fascist. Oh, you like Biden? Then you're some evil child molesting, devil worshipping communist. I've unfortunately had a few of these conversations myself with people that were very close to me. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the political discourse in this country is completely pointless. It's carried out by disingenuous, money-hungry individuals who are really just entertainers more than anything else. Their whole job is to keep your viewer retention, to make you enraged and emotional so that you are more engaged. They don't talk about policy. They don't have actual debates on which policies would serve the populace better. It's none of that. Therefore, the discussions, the political arguments we have with our friends and family based on these even dumber conversations are most likely meaningless. Well, at least they mean less than the connections that we share with our loved ones. They mean less than the millions of other things we can talk about with each other instead of politics that can enrich in our lives and make us just happier for that one day. And that at its core is what the Bad Batch is really about. Crosshair loses sight that his family was more important than his orders. And the Bad Batch, they forget to forgive Crosshair for making this mistake. And it really takes someone like Omega, who literally had no other family than Nala Se all of her life, to make them understand the importance of what they have. Actually, if you think about it, Omega actually watched the Bad Batch develop in little tubes from fetuses into newborn babies. In appearance, Omega might seem like the Bad Batch's little sister, but the reality is she's more like a mother or elderly sister, a guardian of sorts. And it's only because of her wisdom, of her understanding of how special Clone Force 99 is, that Crosshair is given an opportunity to return back to the fold. She's like a miniature Dominic Toretto dragging Crosshair along with her. And because of Omega's healing actions, it gives Crosshair an opportunity to at least redeem himself, first by saving her from drowning, and later when Crosshair frags his own officer. It's because of Omega that the Bad Batch eventually get to hear Crosshair's side of the story, and how he viewed them as traitors, and how it was Hunter, Wrecker, and Echo that had abandoned him, and not the other way around. Now, even though Crosshair might be a bit twisted in his view of things, I think his family, the Bad Batch, definitely understand him. And hearing him say this directly to them probably helps them forgive him as well. Omega was really the last strand connecting Crosshair to his old family, and I think without her, they might have killed each other, which would have been tragic. And so remember, guys, we all have our little Bad Batches, our own little families. They don't need to be blood relatives or even childhood friends. They're just people who you can depend on, who you value more than anything else in the world. These are people who might have different views from you about a lot of things, but you're able to find a mutual understanding and respect for one another that overrides any other disagreement you might have. You know, there's a saying, God, country, and family. It's usually said by individuals who want to proclaim their devotion to those things, usually in that order, God, then country, then family. But I gotta say, that God you're worshiping guy, it might be the wrong one. It might be a false prophet. It might be a God made by man for other men to listen to. There's so many religions in the world. Most of them have to be wrong, right? And then there's a nation, right? It's good to be loyal to a nation, to have pride in one's nation. But nations come and go, they rise and fall, they can betray individuals for the greater good. It's really family. Family is the only thing you can really depend on. It's the only place where you can get safety, security, unconditional love. It is really the most important thing in one's life that you can have, whether it's the family we are born into or the family we create with our friends. And this is the message that the Bad Batch has been desperately trying to pound into our heads since the first season. All the other stuff, the Galactic Civil War, the Empire, the fall of the Republic, the Jedi, that's all just noise in the background. What is clearly the most important thing in the show is the connection between all of these individuals and the love that they share for one another. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. See you next time.